This, our country and all its people, could be in danger of nuclear attack. In minutes by enemy missiles. In hours by enemy aircraft.
We live in a world where we can never be too prepared. Natural disaster, the threat of terrorist attack, biological, chemical, nuclear, radiological hazards, all a reality in the world we live in. What steps have you taken to ensure that you and your family will be prepared in the event of unexpected tragedy? We urge you to please know that there is a way out. There is a way to secure the well-being of you and yours. There is hope. However dark the darkest hour, Alpine Air Foods has provided you with a solution. Alpine Air Foods has been producing quality, freeze-dried, dehydrated, instant meals for over 21 years. These foods are all natural, retaining over 98% of the nutritional content and have an extendable shelf life of up to 15 years. What better way to arm you and your family in the event of a disaster, eh? Well, we've always said it's better to be safe than to be sorry. Shouldn't you? Order today and receive your first shipment of delicious Alpine Air meals in a matter of days. Because it's never too soon to begin considering alternative solutions. To begin taking the safety of you and your family into your own hands. Please, call today.
Welcome back to CPNLive.com. I'm Tom Brush, your host, and today's guest is Clif High, author of the report known as The Shape of Things to Come. We were just talking about some of the economic implications of what the data in the report reveals. And we had another question here from one of our chat listeners, Clif, and that was if the dollar is going to flop, basically, is there going to be any kind of a global currency introduced, and will it be successful?
We don't have anything in our data to suggest that. No, it's going to have big impacts on other currencies as the dollar goes down. There's no real suggestion at this point that anything other than an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver will be accepted or a gallon of oil, something solid, will be accepted as currency in the future.
Okay.
Basically, the long-term stuff we do show, though, shows a calorie-based economy, energy, extra food calories, and then secondary storage of wealth in the form of silver and gold and other precious metals.
Sure, and that makes sense. And I think that if you look at what's happened in the metals markets, particularly the physical metals markets over the last year since the banks started collapsing, there seems to be a recognition of that. There's shortages, have been shortages of silver and gold coins and the kind of things that people can actually use to trade with. And yet I hear other people saying that the public yet really hasn't woken up to the need for storing wealth in gold or silver. It's kind of a conflicting situation.
Well, there's just so many of us that the vast majority have not indeed picked up on this yet. And I think a lot of these things move through society the way Moore described the movement of technology through corporations. That there's a visionary stage where a few people, pathfinders, if you will, go out and discover it. Then there's the early adopters, and then there's this gap. And then there's the mainstream that starts to pick up on it after that gap exists. And we're just crossing that gap relative to gold and silver, I think. Because our data suggests that the panic to own, because we get everything in linguistics, we get little phrases that are interesting. And relative to gold and silver, sometime in January of this coming year, the words will be panic to own, as though everybody suddenly wakes up and says, oh, I got to go get some of that.
Wow. So the time to acquire it, if you've got the means, would be now rather than later, I suppose.
That would make sense. Do it before everybody else panics. Yeah, save your panic for later, you know.
One thing I wanted to ask you about that was kind of interesting, you talk about the swine flu virus and maybe a more deadly version of that being sprung on the public, maybe in conjunction with the Olympic Games, and then people refusing to be inoculated, and that playing into this whole dance. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, there's two specific waves of what we call the refuseniks, and that'll be a more or less loosely organized group of individuals that simply won't go along with the powers that be propaganda about the vaccine and about the disease. And the first wave will be relative to parents who don't want their children vaccinated this fall within a month or so. And then the second wave will be in January or February. And the second wave will be relative to the wider scale distribution of a much more lethal version of the virus. Our data suggests that what's going to happen is that somebody who does take or people, not an individual necessarily, who do take the vaccine this fall will contribute to the mutation of it, and we'll get another wave of it in January or February that's actually a much nastier bug, although even that said, it'll be on its way to de-evolving into something less lethal. Its lethality won't be an issue much past June or July of 2010, but it's going to be at least very hyped in the January-February time period, and it will appear as though the Olympics here in Canada will act as a distribution vehicle for the virus on a global scale.
But you're saying then that overall it's not the doomsday mechanism maybe that some people are making it out to be?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm saying that there will be a more lethal version, but that if you're healthy, it's no more threatening to you than regular flu, and it will be a rundown immune system and other issues that would make you vulnerable to it, and that we won't have the level of pandemic die-off that the powers that be want from this, nor anything comparable to what occurred in 1918.
Now, how do the refuseniks fit into this situation, though, that described in the report where there's if I understood it correctly, there's kind of a repression by the powers that be against the people who don't want either their children or themselves to be inoculated?
In the early wave of the refuseniks in this fall, they'll try imposing individual sanctions in the sense of firing individuals at certain corporations that refuse to take the vaccine, or they'll impose sanctions in the form of saying your kids can't come to school, and they'll do it on an individual level and try and intimidate enough people that way, and through word of mouth get everybody to comply. The issue in or late winter, early spring appears to be a situation where there's some form of a demonstration, protest, something along those lines by people that are refuseniks, that are in other ways, in no other way impacting society other than they refuse to take the vaccine, and they're vocal about it, and that group will be suppressed, and in a fashion that may be reminiscent of something we're seeing in the G20 protests now, and it will be unwarranted, but it'll basically be the first instance within the continental U.S. of the, or the second, if you will, not counting the G20 now, of the iron fist coming out of the velvet glove kind of a situation.
I see. Does this, I guess,